turn to lead the Alba Party, luckily for us and luckily for Scotland. So let me introduce the former First Minister of Scotland, the leader of the Alba Party, the Right Honourable Alex Salmond.
Well, Denise and friends, I'm delighted to be at this first ever Alapa Burn Supper. And burn suppers are extraordinary occasions. The first one was about 5 years after Burns' death in 1801. 9 of his pals got together and had a commemoration for their lost friends with lots of haggis, lots of meats, lots of tatties, and lots of drink. And then the tradition was born, and about a million or so burn suppers later, here we are in Dundee tonight. And every one of these burn suppers has an immortal memory. When somebody gets up and says something about the poet and his works, and what the poet's works have meant to them and to the assembly there gathered. And it falls upon me tonight. Every burn supper, every immortal memory is individual. But this is different in its way because this is also a fundraiser for Alapa candidates in the upcoming local elections. And here we have Alapa candidates, people intending to become Alapa candidates from around Scotland. So could everyone who is hoping to be an Alapa candidate in these elections from around Scotland please stand up so the rest of us can give you a round of applause. To the Dundee and Angus intending Alapa candidates. So they stay on their feet, everybody else give them a smashing round of applause. Tonight, one of Alapa's existing elected members of the Westminster Parliament, Neil Hanvey MP for Dundee. Dundee. We have two very important organisations part of the Alapa family. We've got people from Asian Scots for Alapa and the newly formed African Scots for Alapa. Now, finally, and this is something of an announcement for any of you who haven't been watching your courier flashing up the latest news, I'm delighted to say that this very day, Alapa gained its first ever councillor in the Yes City of Dundee, and he joins us this evening, Councillor Alan Ross from Dundee. Of many, many more to come. You're very welcome indeed, as indeed are you all. Now, having done that, I stand here basically with an overwhelming sense of relief. Because I'm doing the immortal memory tonight. But if I'd been unlucky, I might have been doing the toast to the lassies. Now, there's no problem doing the toast to the lassies. Toast to the lassies are perfectly respectable toast. The problem is the reply. Because I've done lots of toasts to the lassies, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say, how nice you are, how amenable you are. You get slaughtered. Somebody stands up, often somebody you don't even know, stands up and takes you to bits. So I am so pleased that Alapa's General Secretary, Councillor Christopher McElhenney, is proposing the toast to the lassies. You know, I've toasted so many great women around this. I've toasted Her Majesty the Queen at Balmoral. Trust me. Prince Charles did the reply from the lasses that night. I've toasted Lulu. She kind of shouted her reply. I've toasted Madam Whiplash. Shortly after she stood as an independent candidate in the government by-election in 1988, I won supper 1989, I toasted Madam Whiplash. I've toasted Baroness Annabel Goldie at the Girl Guides Bun Supper. I use that Girl Guides, the old-fashioned and probably jailable term in Scotland these days. I've toasted Cristiano Ronaldo. That was a misunderstanding. It was my fault entirely. I thought it was the international transfer. I've toasted Ant or Deck. I could never tell them apart. I even toasted Attraction, who was the wonder filly owned by the Duke of Roxburgh. I've toasted a racehorse at a bird supper. And it doesn't matter who you toast. Any of these wonderful women, even Attraction the filly, you get slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered in the reply. Now listen, I've been in some sticky situations in my time. I've been thrown out the House of Commons, and I'm not talking about for an afternoon and sworn back in at night. I'm talking about full bunter for a week. I'm talking about defenestration, bums out the window. I'm talking about the full thing. Merely for intervening in the middle of a budget, admittedly, but nonetheless. So that was sticky. I mean, I've fought a referendum for independence for this country that was refused. That's in the High Court of Judiciary. So I've been in a few sticky situations in my time, but none of them, not a single one of them compares to the night I toasted Miss Tasbina Ahmed Sheikh in the hallowed halls of the House of Commons. It was nice. I praised her to the skies. I praised women to the sky. I praised everybody in the sky. It didn't matter what. I got hanged, drawn, and quartered. You see, Christopher, that scene at the end, for those of you who don't have a programme, Christopher is doing the toast to the lassies, and Miss Ahmed Sheikh is replying tonight. The scene at the end of Braveheart. No, the bit before he shouts freedom. He hacked him in pieces small, she hacked him in pieces small. I've told you how they swept Dundee and tamed the Lindsay's pride, but never have I told you yet how the great Marquis died. Christopher, you're going to die tonight. Christopher knows I'm a Presbyterian. He is not quite of my faith in the Christian denominations. That doesn't mean I'm not sympathetic to my brother man. But Christopher, prepare to meet your maker. Or as in the epitaph of Martin Hazelbond in Cotton Cemetery in Edinburgh says, "Here lie I, Martin Hazelbond, have mercy on my soul, Lord God, as I would do if I were you, and you were Martin Hazelbond. Have mercy on your soul." Enjoy every minute as I'm doing the immortal memory. Now, I false regard for the fact that the three great days in the Scottish calendar, let's think about this. St Andrew's Day, our national day of patroncy, 3rd of November. Hogmanay, my birthday. For those of you current members of ALPA, who forgot to send me a card. I just thought I'd mention it. Hogmanay, a few folks celebrate Hogmanay, and then of course, toward the end of January, beginning of February, we've got the burn season, which we're in at the present moment. So all of these great days of festivity, of celebrating Scotland, are crammed into 2 months or so in the winter. Some First Minister, not the present one, actually wanted to make that a winter's festival. So we could all be pissed for 2 straight months right through the winter. I thought it was a great idea. I should have hammered it hard. That could have made the difference. I made a speech in Dundee about it, hence Dundee became the Yes City, but I should have spread the message around Scotland. And my father loved these Scottish festivals, and therefore he loved Robert Burns. He wasn't a Burnsian in the sense he could recite vast screeds of Burns' poetry, but he recognised in Burns a fellow patriot, somebody who loved Scotland. My dad was one of these Scots who backed any team against England. Any team at all he would back against England. You know, Tim Henman was playing Pete Sampras at Wimbledon. My dad was right in there behind Sampras, flying the stars and stripes. When the All Blacks played at Twickers, my dad backed New Zealand. And when the English football team played abroad, my father backed the police. So, he kind of lined up for Scotland and against England, with one exception. My dad loved the England cricket team, because he was stationed in the war down in London, and he went to see the MCC play in the wartime test matches, and he got this affinity for the English cricket team. And so my dad was there, backing any team against England. ABE, everything but England, and football and tennis, tiddlywinks, didn't matter, except for cricket, where he lined up behind the England team. And my dad was a great cricketer, and one of his favourite stories in Burns Night or Hogmanay or St Andrews Night was about he and John Bambury, his pal at school, once had a last stand at the Murrays as 2 15-year-olds drafted into the countryside in a huge match, a final, at the Murray's cricket ground between Linlithgow and Bowness. There they were, last men in, 2 15-year-olds, 20 to win. And that was it. Balls were being bowled. And the demon bowlers were coming flashing down, the 2 young lads still doing their best. But gradually, by some miracle, by glances and deflections and runs scrambled here and there and leg buys and whatever else was happening, they edged towards the total. And there they were, within sight of this heroic last stand as 2 boys who were playing for an outfit called the Black Bitch Team. Some of you may have noticed the recent publicity where an English pub did. Black Bitch in Linlithgow is a term of great endearment. It means you're born within the sound of St Michael's bells, and you celebrate the Black Bitch. Literally, the Black Bitch, she was loyal to her master and brought food out to the island in the loch in Linlithgow. So he didn't starve, and then they found out that the Black Bitch was doing that, so they put them both in the island, and they both starved. But that was it's a term of great endearment in Linlithgow. There's a pub chain trying to change the name from the Black Bitch Tavern, which has been there since the 15th century, to the Black Hound Tavern. Now it's quite a campaign and celebrity. He was playing, and John Bambury playing for the Black Bitch team. And there they are, 2 runs away from victory. From an extraordinary victory as 2 15-year-old lads. And as they were, the fast bowler was lining up to bowl another bowl, all of a sudden, Charlie Benham, who was 75-year-old, was the umpire who'd been part and parcel of West Lothian cricket for more than half a century. Umpire stops the fast bowler in his tracks. Says, "Hot play." And this funeral cortege went past the cricket ground. And Charlie Benham took off his hat and he indicated to the rest of the teams that they should do likewise. And so at this moment of high drama, the entire cricket ground was silent as they watched this funeral procession wend its way past the Murray's cricket ground between Linlithgow and Bowness. and the cortege passed. And Charlie put his hat back on and said, well, fast forward came streaming round, totally put off his stroke, rolled it right over my dad's head and it went for 4 runs. So victory! The two 15-year-olds were triumphant. They got carried off the pitch into the pavilion. Mass celebrations for the Blackbridge team. The win had been achieved. So my dad and John Bambury, whose son incidentally, Ronnie, is a member of Alapa, just a little footnote there. They went up to Charlie Benham after the match and said, look, umpire, we're delighted to, we're going to get a game in the team now. This is fantastic. This is the best day of our lives. But we'd just like to say that you taught us something really important today. Perhaps even more important than cricket. You taught us respect. You stopped the game to pay respect to the funeral cortege that went past. And Charlie Benham replied, it was the least I could do. She was a good wife to me for the last 50 years. My father loved cricket. And he loved Scotland. In all mortal memories, we often say, if Robert Burns were alive today, and you say the things he would or wouldn't have done. If Robert Burns were alive today, he'd be very old. One thing. But I'm going to say, and of course you're meant to say, of course, he would never join a political party. But I'm telling you tonight, if Robert Burns were alive today, he'd join Alapa. I also have to say, it might not last long. With Hamish Vernal in charge of the discipline committee. I recall that Hugh McDermott, once in the 1950s, was simultaneously expelled from the Communist Party and the SNP at the same time. Expelled from the SNP for being too left-wing, expelled from the Communist Party for being too nationalist. I would think that once they had a good look at Ravi's tweets and social media presence, the Hamish and his committee might have to perform the unfortunate duty of suspending the greatest Scottish genius in world history, such as the onerous duties on disciplinary committee. But I do believe that Robert Burns would at least be an Alapa, however transient his membership was. There's 3 reasons for that. Burns is a patriot. I'm not talking about somebody quite like Scotland, a 90-minute nationalist. I'm talking about an absolute dyed-in-the-wool, blood in the veins patriot. And if they'd done tattoos, which they didn't much in the 18th century Scotland, Burns would have been like Sean Connery, who had Scotland forever, or Sir Albert perhaps, tattooed in his forearm. Or as he wrote in an autobiographical letter to John Moore, that the story of Wallace, because Blind Harry's account of the life of Wallace was the second book that Robert Burns read after the Bible. So the story of Wallace and Bruce poured a Scottish prejudice in my veins, which would boil along there till the floodgates of life shut in eternal rest. So Burns was 100% Scottish patriot. And he would look at those who, for reasons best known to themselves, pass up the greatest political weakness of Westminster and therefore the greatest political opportunity for Scotland in my lifetime. And for reasons which I cannot fathom, think that this is a good time to delay putting matters to the touch as opposed to striking when our opponents are in disarray. And Burns might have said, you're bought and sold for English gold, sick a parcel of rogues in a nation. The second reason that Burns would have been in Alapa, in my estimation, would have been reflecting the things that are reflected in the local government manifesto which these candidates are going to put to the people in a few weeks' time. He'd have been interested in our proposals to address in a serious sense poverty which is rife across Scotland, family poverty, child poverty, people struggling to make ends meet. There's no doubt where Burns' sympathies lay in terms of the class structure of the society that he lived in and the society we still live in. You see on Burkie, Lord, the struts and stairs and all that. And his worship, but his word is but a coof for all that. For all that and all that, his ribbon star and all that. The man of independent mind looks and laughs at all that. Burns once addressed the House of Commons about the iniquity of imposing a whisky tax upon Scotland. You think he wouldn't be addressing the Scottish Government about the iniquities of the council tax and its oppression as an unequal taxation among ordinary working people? So Burns would have approved of and endorsed the second strand of the Alapa Manifesto. And the third strand, Burns would have endorsed as well. Burns is often accused of being a licentious, a reprobate, a rake, and I mean, look, no one seriously would say that he was a paragon of virtue. He had vices as well as virtues. But I'll tell you one thing he wasn't. He most certainly wasn't a misogynist. And I can tell you another thing, if Robert Burns was arranging a Burns supper, you wouldn't have any male-only Burns suppers. I can absolutely promise you that as well. But he just was in advance of his time. He was hundreds of years in advance of his time and his attitude to women. Now, Europe's eye is fixed on mighty things, the fate of empires, the fall of kings, the quacks of state must each produce their plan, and even children list the rights of man. Amid this mighty fuss, just let me mention the rights of women merit some attention. The Burns wrote that poem and for Louise Fontenelle, so she could perform it at the Globe Theatre in Dumfries. It was a reflection, of course, of the rights of man by Thomas Paine at the time, so it wasn't just a poem of equality and the rights of women, it was a poem of radicalism. And I think it's interesting, it's almost certain that the thing that provoked the authorities' investigation into Burns for sedition, Burns was an exciseman at the time, the thing that absolutely took it over the edge to be an investigation wasn't poems like the Twa Dugs, which he ridiculed the aristocracy. It wasn't the ode to George Washington's birthday. It wasn't even signing up and supporting the sending of guns, carronades to France. It wasn't the hymn and anthem of equality, a man's a man. It was the performance of the rights of women at the Globe Theatre in Dumfries in the autumn of 1792. I always think it's quite interesting, the thing that the authorities felt most frightened about, which was totally beyond the pale, was a poem about the rights of women. So Burns was a radical, way in advance of his time, and echoing views which he would find to endorse in the Turn Alapa Manifesto. And as we recognise the drumbeats of war, which are echoing once again. Now, I look at the House of Commons, not much, but I look at it, and I can't understand, I genuinely can't understand, that we now have the least representative House of Commons in living memory. Right, when I went to House of Commons first in the late 80s, there were people in the Labour Party, the Tory Party, who when it came to a moral issue, they would take a stand. They would stand up and they would dissent and they would take whatever odium or shit came their way because they knew it was the right thing to do. They were people worth listening to. And there's a handful left, our ARPA MPs, of course. David Davis will be 1, 2 in the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. And that's it. And I'm ashamed to say in the SNP benches, they'll get fed piffle and they'll nod their heads as if they're in some sort of neocon incentive scheme to gain favour with the establishment. Do they actually believe that if they fawn to the British establishment, that Westminster's going to say to them, well done, chaps, you've supported us in the latest war. As a result, we're going to grant you your independence. In what universe, in what planet do these people live in? Burns didn't live in that planet. Well, the rest of the country was getting infected by the drums beginning to beat. Burns looked at the celebrations of a national victory and said, ye hypocrites, are these your pranks to murder men and give God thanks? Desist for shame, proceed no further. God won't accept your thanks for murder. I long for seeing voices which are prepared to oppose the status quo, the establishment view, and to recognise that we've got a weak president who's beating the drums to counter his lack of popular support at home. A Prime Minister, I was going to describe him as weak. I mean, a Prime Minister who's falling over. And I don't mean through overindulgence of parties, I mean from a total lack of political perspective. We're now in a situation where the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland goes to Ukraine to get away from his difficulties. So I long for hearing voices which will represent the radicalism of Burns, the sort of things that makes it worthwhile seeking our nation's independence. Would Burns have joined the ALPA? Probably. Would he have lasted long? I'm not sure. But whether he was in or out, his sentiments would have been with the sentiments we are putting forward to the Scottish people, and that's what counts. But one more thing that Burns had, and probably his most important human quality of all. Burns had empathy. Look for all of Burns' poems, whether he's writing them, he has the extraordinary ability to see the world from his subject's point of view. Even if it's a mouse, he can see the world from the point of view of the mouse. And I was taught that very early because I looked not so much at Burns' poetry, but Burns' diaries. As he progressed through Scotland as a Presbyterian sympathising with the Gaels, with the Catholic Highland clansmen, looking and trying to interpret Scottish history from that point of understanding. My hometown is Linlithgow, as I've mentioned. And this is what Burns wrote in his diary about Linlithgow. On the first day of the trip, Saturday the 25th, Linlithgow, the appearance of rude, delayed, idle grandeur, as they changed now. Charming and rural, retired situation, the old rough royal palace, a tolerably fine but melancholy ruin, sweetly situated in a small elevation on the brink of a loch. Shown the room where the beautiful, injured Mary Queen of Scots was born. A pretty good old Gothic church, the infamous School of Repentance, situated in the old Romanish way in a lofty situation. What a poor, pimping business is a Presbyterian place of worship. Dirty, narrow, squalid, stuck in a corner of old Papish grandeur, such as Linlithgow. Now, what's the point about this? Well, the point about this is Burns had come to Linlithgow to be inculcated into the Masonic Lodge, to be celebrated as Scotia's Bart by the local masons. It was to be made a freeman of the borough. The ancient royal borough of Linlithgow. This was an enormous honour for the young poet. An extraordinary honour. And yet in his diaries, he doesn't mention it. He doesn't mention about being celebrated, being brought forward, and being elevated to be a free man of Linlithgow. He writes about Scotland's lost, beautiful, injured, Catholic queen. Because Burns had empathy, the ability to look beyond his own background, his own point of view, his own religion, and see the world from someone else's perspective. And if Robert Burns had anything to teach ALPA, and I believe he has a lot, it's that we have to see Scotland from the other person's point of view. There's an old Paul Robeson song called What is America to Me? Paul Robeson, the early civil rights campaigner, treated abysmally by the American authorities, subjected to McCarthyism before McCarthy had his passport and his ability to sing taken away from him. But one of his songs was, What is America to me? And the conclusion of the song is America is about the people. It's about the whole variety and panoply of people, regardless of what the government did or what wrongs were done to him. America was the worker at my side. And that's how we've got to regard Scotland in Alba. It's what Robert Burns would have wanted us to do. And that's why Alba, 6,500 strong and growing, is powerful. Not through numbers, but because if you look around this room, you see a reflection of Scotland. Scots Asians for Alba, African Scots for Alba. The whole variety of points of view and the galaxy of variety that is our Scotland. And the empathy that all of us must have to hold that coalition together and to take our country to where it needs to be, to national independence. I think that's what Rabbie would have wanted for us. That man to man and woman to woman shall brothers and sisters be the world. Lassies and laddies, please be upstanding to toast with me in the immortal memory of Robert Burns. The immortal memory of Robert Burns.